It's been a while since we jumped back into the book bag, huh? So let's talk about some fun literary topics. Hey everybody, my name is Rob. This is my mom Karen. We are hosts of Books Banter and Beyond, and today we have one of our special edition episodes known as Into the Book Bag. It is basically a variety of different literary book, author, whatever subject matters, and hopefully, I think you'll enjoy these ones because these are kind of thought-provoking today, right?
Yep.
We have one that's all about censorship and one all about if you can really write. I'm just kidding. All right, so let's jump into topic number one here. And this is one that is still in the news and seems to consistently be in the news, at least throughout the United States. I'm not sure outside, but book banning.
Right.
Book banning, I guess, actually has been around for a long, long time, way, way back. But actually different reasons for what it was today. For the longest time, anything that was written, literary wise, could be banned by, let's say, kings, queens, or the government solely to protect themselves. So, book banning in the past was to really make sure that those people who ran the country stayed running the country, right? They didn't want anything written. And this goes back to even if you go to like Roman times with people like, Caesar, that were all these people. There were people writing stuff about them. And if those guys didn't like it, well, the punishment was not very fun. Let's just put it that way. And those writings were quickly burned and you never saw them again, right? Now, today, however, it's a little bit of a different story, right? It's still a form of censorship, but the question of how does it work, it's fairly simple. It's really just a certain state or government, depending on how big it goes, saying this is not okay to read, you're not allowed to have it, at least in the public forum. I don't know exactly how it works as far as personal. I feel like you can still buy it if you find a store.
Right.
But as far as like a school or an institution or maybe a business, you're not allowed to have it or at least discuss, right? Is that am
Right.
I
I think where we're seeing book ban in today's time, we're seeing it in the schools, and we're
more
seeing
yeah, more so in
book
university,
banning
school, all that, yeah.
and libraries that are associated with schools. But if you go,
Right.
if but that doesn't mean you can't go find the book somewhere else. You can go to a bookstore and buy the book. Um,
Right.
right, and I think with digital platforms, and that's a question that I wanted to kind of address with digital platforms and online booksellers, is that has that changed because the ease of being able to get a book has changed.
Well, it's actually interesting because one of the things that any debate usually does is it just makes you want to do the thing more.
Right.
So, what book banning has done, which is the opposite of what they wanted it to do, was really just make people go out and buy, which is great for multiple reasons. One, the author's like, cool, making more money off my book, right? And two, people are reading my book more. Awesome. So, at the end of the day, in a weird way, and I think generally when you have protests, it kind of actually fulfills better in some.
Yes. However, think about yourself growing up, going to school, and all the books that you read during those times. And I think you would be surprised to know that a good many of those books in certain states have now been banned in schools. That you have read books that we have actually reviewed on this show, including Charlotte's Web. So the question is, I don't think it's really just a matter that somebody is banning books and it's the government that this is I think an assault
I
on.
mean, it is. If you're an author or if you're a literary agent or a literary person, you are you're being fueled to.
And children are not learning. Children who normally would read these books and get a well-rounded, I have obviously definite feelings about this, but would get a well-rounded understanding because part of history includes the books that were written during that time. Would you agree?
I will, but I'll throw it back to you because, and again, this might be just as my brain matures. A lot of things I wouldn't want to read now for the uncomfortableness of how it was written. Now, I'll use a very obvious example like the Tom Sawyer Huckleberry Finn. I don't like that book anymore. Not because it's a badly written story. I can't. The wording is too much for me. I can't read that. It's too much of a trigger, because I am more well-rounded than obviously. And again, it's bad to say well-rounded because it's not so much that the individual who wrote it was a bad individual. That's what it was. Like that's how they wrote because that's what you talked about. Another example, and you're going to laugh at this, is the Goosebumps books. I loved them growing up. However, I wouldn't recommend reading not so much for the moral, the story, but that's some weird crap that guy wrote. Like again, Stein, and we talked about him before. Awesome man. He basically made the children's horror niche. But I wouldn't touch those books with my life dependent on me. Why? Because as I aged, and this might be a personal ban in my mind, you go back and you go, okay, I can kind of see why they don't want me reading this now. But again, separately from the banning, I think it's a priority of what you're comfortable. I think it goes in the trigger factor too. I think for me, I wouldn't. I'm not for banning books at all. For me, I think as you grow, and maybe it's just me. I don't know if it's for you, but I've talked to some other people. When you do grow and your brain changes, you go back to something, whether it's a film or a book, and you watch it again. You go, like that's wrong. I know, and it's your brain is relearning maybe what it was about and you don't realize what it was because you were 10 and now that you're 30, 40, 50, you go, oh, I read that in school, like it's kind of a
But I think a lot of the books that are being banned right now are being banned because of people who feel that it goes against their belief structure, their religious belief structure, more of that than maybe the Goosebumps horror.
well, no, and I get that part, and I understand how that's the inappropriateness of you're banning it because you want somebody to think like you do, and
Right.
that's never
Bingo. That
and
right.
that's never okay. I just think also you're because I was thinking about this when I was writing it. I think your body and your own personal morals will inadvertently stop you or ban you from certain things when you get older only because of how it makes you feel. And maybe it's because of your belief system. Maybe it's because of whatever. Or maybe it's just because it uses phrases or it uses imagery and you just go, that's not okay. There's a lot of things that I
So
think
we're
go into
talking
it.
reasons. We're literally talking the reasons, right? So
Right.
that's really a question. So, what are the most common reasons for book
I
bans?
mean, yeah, I think it's, the for somebody like Mark Twain who wrote the Huckleberry stuff like that, or Tom Sawyer, that was what he lived in. That's what he knew. Whether or not he agreed or not, we don't know. We can't get into his head, like you've said many times of different authors. But that's what he knew. So that's what he wrote. Does it make it good or bad?
But
I,
what was the
I
reason? So there, why was it banned?
So for things like that, I believe there's a lot of talk of racism, sexism. I guess sometimes it could be religious
Right.
culture. So it varies the gamut for sure. I can only think of a few that were banned off the top of my mind. I know there's a bunch, but I think generally it's one of those things where it's good to ban those ideas, but banning them out of a story or banning the story because you know what I mean? It's kind
And
of a hard
as you said, Mark, let's use Mark Twain. I think it's a perfect example. He wrote what he lived. How,
right,
right? And it's another way for us to learn about those times through the eyes of somebody else. It's not the
right,
only description of what was going on. It's his description. And so it's one of the many ways that we as students in school, whether we're old students, young students, we learn through a variety of ways. We learn through the literature that was written during that time.
right,
And for me, I have a definite, like feeling about the fact and I understand what you're saying as an adult, you can make that decision that you wouldn't want to go there again. But
right,
it's part of, I think, education. It's part of how we learn. We don't just learn dry historical facts. We also learn from the writers in the period, from the food in the period, all the different things that goes on. And I think that we are running a huge risk to make the decision for our children when these have been an additional piece of learning history. I think history is so important. If we don't learn history, we are doomed to repeat it.
No, I agree, and I hear you. I agree with you. I would not. Yeah, it's important to teach correctly, teach the right stuff. But
Right.
I think you got my point as well. I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
if you
Absolutely.
don't want to read something for personal,
Then that's okay. I'm
right?
talking specifically book bans in the schools right now. So let's get into writing talent because that's our next thing in our
And it kind of goes into this a little bit, right? Because it taught, you know.
right.
So the question that I was thinking of is, what does it mean to have writing talent? Because we talked about this before a little bit. Writing talent really is defined by the innate and developed ability to express your ideas, emotions, and narratives in a compelling way. Blah, right? It just sounds very bland, and, you know.
Right.
But I think it goes a little deeper than there. I think it's a not so much can you, it's how do you profess it. And we've talked about it, you know, in horror. We've talked about it in science fiction. Can you get your point across, and can you do it in
Right.
a succinct way where you don't leave the author or the
Right.
reader going, "What the hell did I just?"
Right. It's not a technical skill, right? It's not
No,
really.
it's not.
It's
No,
not a technical. It's how do you connect with your reader?
right. And I think it's somebody like, let's like Lovecraft, who is very out there, hard to connect with him, but when you do connect, boom. Or let's say Tolkien, because we talked about him a lot. Pretty obvious to connect with him. It's a fantasy story, but then you go, oh, there's 30 layers
Right.
of
Right.
this talent. So yeah, I mean, it's for me, what is writing talent? It's can you supply an easy story understandably?
So, do you think you have to have a natural talent to write, or can you learn how to write?
I think going to your thing about learning in school and not suppressing the stuff, I think you can write. I think you can write as much as you want. Whether or not you're going to sell it, whether or not you're going to use it, you will have to learn how to cut it up to make it work.
Right.
So I think anybody can write, but I don't think everybody has the motivation. I'm not going to say ability, the motivation to write a story or a poem. So I think that part of it takes work,
Right.
but I think anybody can write.
Right. And you don't have to write a book, right? You can
Yeah,
write in a
exactly.
journal. You can write a journal.
Writing a message to your loved one, writing an
Right.
email to somebody. You can write, it just depends on what you're doing with it.
Right.
And
Right.
that's where maybe the talent,
Well, I kind of put that everyone can sing, right? Some better than others.
and those people probably took the time to actually
Right.
elevate.
Right. And I think everyone can write, some better than others. I mean, we all learn how to write in school. We don't unnecessarily
Exactly,
learn how
yes.
to write well, but we all learn how to write in school, some better than others. Again, wonderful conversation. Rob, love discussing with you. We want to make sure you tune in next time at the next Books, Banter, and Beyond. Goodbye, everyone.